Hello, everyone. Richard Fredrickson at Al Steakhouse at Jefferson and Hamas, and we've got a great guest to share with you today. But before I do that and introduce my guest to you, I want to mention something that you should take advantage of, and that's Al Steakhouse. A great place for lunch. 7 days a week, they're open, and it's a lunch that you can bring your business partner in there with, your associates, a great place for mom and dad to come with the kids for lunch or dinner. Dinners are fantastic here. You know, they got the seafood buffet on Friday. They got the famous Sunday brunch. If you have folks coming from out of town visiting, Al Steakhouse at Jefferson Hamas is the restaurant to be at. It's the iconic restaurant of Joliet. And you're invited. John, thank you so much. John Crane with us here today, owner of the brand new Hawk Chevrolet, Cadillac, Subaru, Mazda, and Volkswagen in Joliet, Illinois. We're going to find out all about that. We'll get the story for you in just a moment. But as usual, I like to find a little more of the background of the people that we talk to, both here and on the radio. So, John Crane, I think you're going to surprise some people out there because they look at the banners and they think, well, there must be some big, guy out of Chicago or someplace that's moved in here now and has taken over all these, I'm going to call legacy dealerships from the Jacobs family and Darcy. And that's not totally the reality. You're actually from Will County.
It's absolutely correct. I've come all the way from Lockport to take over at Joliet because I went to Lockport High School, live in Homer Glen. So I'm very much a neighbor here. Spent a lot of time in Joliet was a big town when you went to Lockport High School. That was, you'd go there for fun on Friday nights, and it's really great to be back here and get to do business here in a place and sort of prove to the world that this is a great place to do business.
Yeah, fourth largest city in the state of Illinois, and we've got all kinds of new things and exciting things happening in Joliet, and John Crane family and his team of management and great people are going to make it even better as we move through 2015 and on into, I always have trouble saying this, into the 21st century. It's always, I don't know, I'm still back with that book with the 1984, what happens in 1984. Well, John, welcome, and welcome to all of your managers and these great dealerships that you have, and we'll talk about all of that. I want to know a little bit more about you, however. Okay, you went to Lockport High School. You lived in what was then Homer, just plain old Homer Will. Now it's Homer Glen.
That's right.
Tell me more about yourself. What about your education, your background, a little more?
Well, after, I got a great education in Lockport and went on to school at University of Illinois, Chicago. And then later on, I spent on their year abroad program. I lived in Spain for a couple of years and went to University of Barcelona. Then after that, I came back and finished up with a graduate degree at U of Chicago. So that's kind of a tale of two different things. I'm very hometown, but I also lived in Europe for a while, so I got a chance to learn to speak Spanish and Portuguese and a little French, a little Italian. So
we talked earlier, but I want to find out, just between just the two of us and you, what was it like? You're a young guy studying in Barcelona, Spain. Is there anything you could share about those years or that time you were in studying?
Ironically, what was totally different about that is I didn't set foot in an automobile for almost, out of those 2 years, I only think I was in a car 3 or 4 times, other than a taxi or something like that. Because you could do everything. It was a very small city, very condensed, compared to Chicago. I mean, it's a very big city, but I walked almost everywhere. So that was very different, and the hours were different. So they'd still take a siesta. So there's a portion of the time in the afternoon where their lunchtime is 2 to 3 hours, and they'll eat dinner starting at 10. I walked into a restaurant once at 1 a.m. and they were still cooking. So it's a little different lifestyle, but when you get to the summer, you understand why, because the heat is very intense. So there's a reason why people are closed from 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock.
Well, do they leave? Do they go in the summertime in Barcelona and Madrid? Do they they go to the seashore, or do they find some other places to leave, get out of
Yeah.
the city?
Absolutely. In August, that's like vacation month. I mean, you really have a hard time getting anything done except vacationing in August, and people, I mean, they just flock to the shores. Or you know, some people go to the mountains, depending upon what you want. But you know, the seashore is where it's all at right now, and there's plenty of it. You know, so.
Talking to John Crane, owner of our Hawk Auto Group here in Joliet and other stores, about 6 different locations. Your family. Tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, I've got a beautiful wife, Annie, and we've got 2 kids together, and 2 kids from previous marriage, one each for each one of us. I've got Katie and Abby at home, a 7 and a 3-year-old, so I'm going to keep working for quite a while. And
7 and a 3-year-old.
They're
That's
all-
going to keep you young.
yeah, they're all girls, and they're very smart too, and they keep you on top of your toes. I was asking the 3-year-old, I said, you know, as you're trying to teach them things, you think you're trying to teach them things. And I said, are these 2 things the same? And she said, no, Dad, they're identical. You know? So she's ahead of me.
Cute. That's
She's
cute.
going to pass me by pretty quick.
Cute. You know, when you were in Barcelona and you're in Spain, the sport that is big, I believe, in that area is soccer. So are your girls watching these women in the World Soccer Cup, or is that something you're going to encourage them to get involved? I know education, you're going to take care of that, but soccer seems to be just igniting among both boys and girls, but particularly girls this year.
Yes, I mean, they're not quite into soccer yet, but they will, because soccer, what's great about that sport is if you can run, you can play, right? So it's not the highly skilled like baseball that you need if you can't really you know, pitch or something like that, or you're not great at catching.
Or you can't hit a curveball.
Or you can't hit. Then maybe you shouldn't be playing baseball, I guess. But no, soccer, if you can run, you can play, and everybody gets to be part of it. So that's why the sport really catches on, because all you got to do is run and kick the ball. That's oversimplified, of course.
Yeah. Now, your family, that's your immediate family. Anybody else involved in your business from your family?
Yes, I have 3 brothers, 2 of which are deeply involved in the business. Each of them owns a store. Both of them are Dodge Chrysler Jeep owners, one in Forest Park and one out in Michigan City, Indiana. So the family's in the car business.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that leads me to the question that you want to know and I want to know. Okay, you're studying in Barcelona, you come back, you get degrees. I'm not hearing any educational venue that leads you to this automotive industry. What is the trigger mechanism? What is the history, the legacy? How'd you get involved in cars, or have you always been somehow involved in cars?
My father owned a car dealership when I was growing up, and he said, it's too hard of a work, it's too many hours, I don't want you in it, go get a decent education. So that's what I did. I spent some time, you know, learning more about the world and learning. I think the school part of it for me was that you learn how to compete with people who are very highly talented as well. You know, I think sometimes it's easy to, you know, to be the brightest in your homeroom class in 4th grade, but when you've got to compete with people who are all of the brightest from all of the schools, and that's what grad school taught me essentially, is that as much as you think you're preparing, there's somebody who's preparing even more. So in that sense, even though I was studying something else, my education really prepared me for this business, because it's highly competitive and you're dealing with some people who have deeply invested into what they're doing, and everybody works very hard to do this. And the good thing here in Joliet, I would say, is you've got a history of some pretty good dealers here. You know, hats off to my competition at someone like Terry Darcy, who does a great job. He's involved in the community, and you know, if I can live up to what the Jacobs have done in the community here and what Terry does in the community, that's good for everyone. You know, we want to give everybody here every reason to stay in town and buy in town.
Well, for the time that I've been with John Crane today, we did the radio earlier, and we're doing this now for you. Just my first impression is they're not only going to keep up, but they're going to surpass that kind of community outreach, involvement, and salesmanship, the kind we like, and professionalism that you're going to find at the Hawk right here in town at Chevrolet and Cadillac, Subaru, Mazda, and Volkswagen. But now there is a little bit of history here that I want to explore, and you old timers out there, you're going to say, "Oh yeah, I remember that." It's not that many years ago, really, although time does fly. Before your dad got his own store, he did. This is like the old movies. He did a little time in Joliet.
Yes,
didn't
he did. He did some good time in Joliet. My father was both a sales manager at a couple different places, including Rich Crandall Chrysler Plymouth, John Bays Toyota. So he spent several years out here, and he even had his own used car lot out here for a while. And you know, he enjoyed his time here, and it prepared him for an opportunity out in the Lothian, where he owned a Dodge store for almost 20 years, and did a big job there.
And probably many of you who've been driving around recognize Midlothian Dodge, because I do. When John mentioned that to me, he said, I know exactly where that's at, and did a lot of branding of that store as well. And then John Bay mentioned John Bays. He goes from selling used cars to one of the best developers we have here in Joliet and beyond. What John and Jessica have done in the development of condos, office buildings, convention centers, you name it. So there's a linkage of history of the Crane family here in Joliet, and now we're going to discover more of that. So how did you're out in Midlothian, you've got dealerships now out there, but how about that first one? I'm still curious about how you got involved as a car dealer, opening your own store. Now, your dad's advice to you years ago was a lot of hours and, get yourself an education. Now, you've got the education, you're looking at Dad, and what do you do?
Yeah, I do the opposite, but I did he gave me the advice, learn to speak another language, and I did. I learned to speak Spanish. That's been helpful to me along the way, because there's a lot of people who speak Spanish,
right.
And it opens up a whole new world to you when you learn a new language. But so I listened to his advice, but at the same time, I took a summer off from teaching, because I was teaching at the time. I was teaching Spanish and Portuguese.
I
taught.
So
this takes place, I taught at Lake Forest College Spanish, so I was driving all the way up to Lake Forest, and then in the afternoons I taught Portuguese at U of Chicago. And again, I think I was also working as an interpreter in the court system for Cook County courts, so I was driving 3.5 hours a day to make my, not a very good income, but enough to keep me through college. And I took the summer off, and I stayed at my dad's dealership, and happy to say I was able to make an impact, and we increased our truck sales about 40–50% in that summer. So my dad definitely wanted me to stay on. So as the summer came to a close, I made the decision, well, if I'm going to be working 40 hours a week, whether it's 20 hours driving and 20 hours teaching, or 40+ hours in the car business, I might as well do what I'm prepared to do, and do what I have some insight on, and dedicate myself to the car business.
Well, Dad was happy to have you, because undoubtedly you were moving the merch you were able to sell.
Yeah,
right?
First I started out learning how to wash the merch. So I washed the cars for a couple of years before that, and then finally, in the late 80s, he had me on to start selling cars, and then as things moved on, at about 1993, that's when I made the switch from the academic world right into the car world.
So let's leap ahead a bit. And what's that first step for your own store? Your first store, was that here in Will County also?
No, my first store, I bought a Dodge only ticket that was in Forest Park. It was owned by AutoNation. So this is David versus Goliath story, I guess, in some sense, because here's this this giant corporation that owns almost 300 dealerships, and they had one they didn't know how to fix. And fortunately, I had a lot of experience with Dodge, and I knew I had experience turning around a couple of dealerships along the way. So when I got the opportunity to take over a store with AutoNation, We negotiated a deal, and they sold me that store, and then we were able to turn it around in a pretty short order. It took a couple of years to get that one right, but we've been there for 13 years now, and the business keeps growing. That's our Hawk Dodge Chrysler Jeep store. My brother Joe owns and runs that store together with me.
So from that store, you actually have six locations.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was
It's
what,
about 9 franchises.
Nine
I think.
franchises. So how in the world do you make that step, and where did you meet to begin any kind of negotiations with Darcy or the Jacobs family? How did that all take place?
To me, it's an interesting story. As I'm closing the deal with the guy from AutoNation, a gentleman named Steve Hyatt, he said to me, well, we know that, in the future we might be selling some other things. And I said, absolutely, I want to buy another store if I get the opportunity. And I said, would you give me a written right to buy another store? And he said, I can't, but I'll give you my word. So it was just like that Jerry Maguire moment where you go, okay, corporate guy giving me his word. Okay. Well, lo and behold, a year later, he came to me and said, we're selling some more stores. They called me on a Friday, said, I'll see you Monday morning. We're selling some stores. Sat in front of me Monday morning, and I made him an offer right then and there, and then we bought our first Ford store, which is Gulf Mill Ford up on the north side. That was a store that was not even in the top 100 for Ford for the region, and we took that store within 2 years to #1, and we've been #1 ever since, about almost 10 years. So that was our big break with AutoNation, and they kind of regretted selling me that store later. They're like, how did we miss this?
Yeah, how do we miss that? Why didn't we do that?
Yeah. But so that was the big break with Ford, and then Ford had another legacy type store where the Hawkinsons, and that's where our name comes from. The Hawkinson family owned the store for about 60 years, and just decided it was time for them to get out of the business. And fortunately, we had a decent reputation, and when we met and sat down with them, they decided it was okay to sell to us, and we made a deal, and then we became, we had 2 of the top Ford stores in all of Illinois and in the Midwest. So
yeah, and that's another family, the Hawkinson family, who I knew back when there was a ballpark, a semi-pro team or a professional team that the Hawkinsons did advertising for, and I was marketing for that ball team. So I met the folks at Hawkinson. Again, that's another.
Great people.
Great people.
Absolutely.
And now you've continued with their reputation and integrity in that area. So from Hawkinson to Hawk, and take us on that tour. What's the next step?
Well, the next step for us was when we were able to buy a Chevrolet store, which was driving distance, a few minutes away in Bridgeview from our Oak Lawn store. So we had we bought the store from the Rizza family, and took that store and turned it into Hawk Chevrolet, and then we decided to rebrand our stores, even our Dodge Chrysler Jeep store, which was Park Plaza, to Hawk. So and the concept there is that we knew we were doing some expansion, and we expected to continue to grow, and we wanted to sort of focus our budget on advertising. And we talked about this in the past about, how do you even get a word in edgewise in the upcoming election year, right?
Yeah, right.
You've got to be able to do some things differently. So we partnered with the Blackhawks, for example, and we've had a pretty good run with them.
Now, how'd that work
promoting
out for
ourselves.
you?
So far it's been a good thing. The association's been good. We had, when the Blackhawks finally decided to sort of bring back the fold, and Bobby Hull and Dennis Savard and Tony Esposito kind of came back as ambassadors. We did one of the first signings that Bobby Hull was allowed to do, and I think we drew almost 1,200 people to our Hawk Ford location. That's the kind of fan response that we were hoping to stay in touch with. And we've been able to do that. The Blackhawks have been a great organization. We've had a lot of fun watching them win some hockey games, and just glad to be part of that.
Yeah, wow. I don't know who made that decision, if it was you, your team, or whatever, but that's a great decision in partnership with the Chicago Blackhawks. So we're in now Joliet, And as you see this show, it'll be maybe what, 2 months or something that you've owned? Well, the Volkswagen dealership you had first, and then the Jacobs.
Right. We bought the Volkswagen dealership from Terry Darcy, who was an absolute gentleman and was a great guy to deal with. It just seemed like we had a good fit for that store. We had a guy who lived in Plainfield. You've met him, Damian Gabris, who's a great guy. He's Polish, but the factory thinks he's German. So no one tell anyone at the VW factory that he's not German, please. But he lives in Plainfield. He's from Europe, so he understands the importance of the brand. He understands what's great about Volkswagen, and he's able to communicate that to the consumers that want it. And we very proud to say that in June we became one of the top 5 for the Midwest region for Volkswagen, based on the hard work that people like Damien put in.
And for you Polish folks who are watching, because I happen to know in the Joliet area, there's been a huge, significant increase in the Polish population. So you know where you could go to talk. And I know Damien has the Polish language down because I've heard him on the phone talking to folks. So it's a great place. So now the Jacobs deal comes a month. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out when this show will be on. A couple of months ago, it takes place.
Right.
People are driving by and they see these banners flapping in the wind. Hawk. How did that go for you? Was that a tough deal to take over the dealership? Was it the Jacobs family? You were some kind of negotiations.
I don't think the negotiations were, it's not that it was a tough deal to make. It was a heartbreaking deal for the Jacobs to sell after 60 years. They were completely invested here in a young man like Trip Jacobs, who spent a lot of time here doing a lot of community activity. They didn't really want to sell. Their heart was still here, but we provided a solution for them. We were able to take over something that was that we're going to be spending, some money modifying the other buildings. So like Mazda's going to get a new building, and Subaru's going to get a new building. So we're going to invest some more money here in the community and keep those stores right here in Joliet. I think it just was time for them to make a change, and fortunately we were able to meet with them and put their fears to bed that it was going to be just some corporate guy taking over or somebody who didn't really care. And after speaking with them and spending some time with Linda Jacobs, I think they made their decision that we'd be an appropriate party to take over what they had started.
Well, family-owned to a family-owned dealership. I think that makes for you and I a great accommodation, because now we're still continuing to deal with family-owned products here, Cadillac, Chevrolet, Subaru, Mazda, and Volkswagen here in Joliet. Now, I know you mentioned this earlier, but I'm old and these things fly by my head. How many? You have 6 locations, correct? Is that right?
Correct.
6 locations.
Yes.
And how many other dealerships you got? Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge.
We have Gulf Mill Ford on the north side, Hawk, Chrysler Dodge Jeep in Forest Park. We have Hawk Chevrolet and Bridgeview, Hawk, Ford in Oak Lawn, and we have the stores here in Joliet that you mentioned. But another thing I'm pretty proud of, and this was part of our strategic decision to get involved here, is that we did a pretty big job. We're the #1 wholesale parts seller for Ford, but we've now, with the recent acquisition, become the #1 wholesale parts seller in general, for both GM, Ford, and all the brands we represent here, including Subaru, Mazda, and we're going to begin operations with VW and CDJ in the state of Illinois, and one of the top in the nation. So you'll see we've got 25 delivery trucks specifically designed to deliver trucks twice a day. Yeah.
So is there a central area for like a warehouse?
We have 3 warehouses right now. We stock over $5 million worth of parts in stock right now. So we sell $3 million worth of parts a month. So it's a big enterprise.
So look for those Hawk trucks everywhere. And the other thing that Jacobs family is known for and Darcy is known for is community outreach, community involvement. I know you have a record of that in your other stores. And just I mean, the banners were put up, and Mary Jaworski from the Joliet Chamber knocked on your door and said, well, you know, we need some support for our New Orleans North. You stepped up, and a great event, fun time. I know that Jim Masinga was out there with the cars. They have all kinds of swag. People loved it. Great time. And then just a week ago or so was Nitro Night on July 9th. And again, you're stepping up and sponsoring that. And that was a great event, NHRA driver appearances in downtown. Both events took place in downtown Joliet. So on behalf of the people of Joliet and Will County, and a lot of folks from Route 66 were also down there with a VIP party from the whole big kickoff that took place on that July 9th, 10th, 11th weekend. So we thank you for that as well. It has been, as we wrap things up here, as you're talking to your manager, your different stores, and I know that they, you have your meetings. What's their impression of Joliet so far? I mean, in terms of relationship, sales, impressions of just, it's different from Chicago, it's different from Oak Lawn, it's definitely different from Golf Mill. What's been their impression so far?
Well, it's funny that you say that because, the community thanks us for what we did, and we appreciate that, but actually I got to thank the community too, because when Jim Masinga, our general manager, went to that New Orleans night, he said, I'm going to pop in for an hour after work, and he expected to spend 1 hour there, and didn't really know how it was going to be. He was there till 11 o'clock at night, shaking hands and talking to people, and a lot of people sharing some great stories. And the great thing about Joliet is it really is just the biggest small town, and people want to do business here. We got to give them every reason to not have to shop anyplace else. But if we do that, they're going to be loyal to us. So it's a great opportunity for us. We're very happy to be here. We know what we have. We have something special here. There's a lot of world-class things about Joliet. And if not everybody finds out about all those things, that's okay by us, There's just so much great happening here in Joliet, including, things like we talked about earlier, the Autobahn Country Club, which is
well, let's share that with the folks, because we'll end up on that one, because you're not listening closely on this one. Watch this now. As I ask this question, what about the Autobahn Country Club, of which you're a member of? You just go out there and just kind of relax and watch things go by?
No, actually, we get in the car and we drive them hard and have fun with that. And we have a Corvette event that Jacobs has been doing, but we're going to continue to do that. So there's a Corvette event in August, I believe, at the Country Club. And we also did a 12-hour enduro race, which was a lot of fun in a Ford Mustang 302S. So 12-hour racing nonstop in that car at the Autobahn, and I think we did that in November. It was their first one ever, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of guys had a lot of fun.
I don't know about 12 hours. I don't know if that's a lot of fun or not. I guess it is.
You switch off.
It's
not 12 hours straight. You switch off.
Was that with your brother?
With my brother and with a couple of other really talented guys. Gary Collins, a nice guy, did some driving for us, and Matt Weathered was also driving with us. So we had a team of guys that were switching off, and we just had a lot of fun and learned a lot about what it takes to get through 12 hours of driving as fast as you can for the entire time.
Well, we thank you, sir, for coming into Joliet.
Thank you. We're lucky to be here.
We're highlighting, showcasing, and now it's your turn to meet Cadillac, Chevrolet, Subaru, Mazda, and Volkswagen Hawk here in Joliet. John, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing more of you.
Great meeting you. Take care. We'll see you next time.